If we're going to be waiting for another 5 years, we're going to be miles behind the curve and it's a waste of time. We could implement this tomorrow.
The younger generation has been exporting PDFs and converting stuff since they've been 5, so they're not going to care too much for your 15-step process for getting a PDF into Xero.
We need to be okay with people taking risks because actually that's going to create innovation and that's how the industry is going to change.
It's always been about, have they got a growth mindset? Are they curious? Are they fearless? Are they willing to push themselves outside of the boundaries?
I haven't been invited to the House of Commons. Clearly, they think I'm too much of a loose cannon to go and attend.
We should be getting the laziest person in our business because the laziest person will always find the shortcuts, and that's how we'll be productive.
When you're bringing on a new system and you're migrating out an old system, most of it means that you are pricing out all of those smaller businesses who can't afford to make that change just yet.
It's only the Americans that really affects and they just don't do dates properly anyway, so who cares?
Please, please, please give your young members the chance to come to these conferences, be exposed to what is going on outside of their little bubble in the office.
Imagine a lot of people didn't go to school and say, I want to be an accountant. But they do want to make a difference in the world.
Hello and welcome to the Digi-Tools and Accrual World podcast, the place to go to get all your insights, tips and tricks and information on the world of tech in accounting in the UK and beyond. I'm joined again by the wonderful co-hosts John Toon and Indy Tatler. We dive into app news as we do every week and also hearing from our sponsor XLedger. But first, John, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks. I've had a fairly chilled weekend so far. I've been seeing my mum because she's in hospital, but it's all good. And looking forward to the next few weeks because we've got quite a few events happening. So it's going to be a busy old few weeks, I reckon, with Fab and Alternative. And I've also got a HLB conference and stuff. And I know you're pretty busy as well, Ryan. So we're all kind of getting down with the work and just cracking on, right?
It is. And sorry to hear about your mum, John. I hope she gets better soon.
Yeah, it's all good. It's just one of those things, isn't it, about getting old, right? You just end up having things happen, and she fell over, broke her hip, so not ideal, but she's all sorted now, and she's been well looked after, so hopefully out by the end of the week, which would be good.
Fingers crossed. And Indy, yourself, how are you?
Yeah, all good. Raring to go for this week's episode.
Well, on that note, I think we should probably just crack straight onto app news.
That's right. The UK government has launched a consultation to explore the adoption of e-invoicing for business transactions, potentially leading to the real-time reporting of transactional data to HMRC. The consultation is going to run until around May 2025 and seeks feedback on whether e-invoicing should be standardised, whether adoption should be voluntary or mandatory, and how it should integrate with the UK's tax system. E-invoicing, it automates the invoice exchange between suppliers and buyers, which reduces errors and manual inputs. It works well with the Making Tax Digital agenda that the government has been on the trail for the last few years to modernise tax compliance, and effectively should be something that gains efficiency for the system and also against potential costs, etc. It kind of, they've got to weigh up how much that will cost them as in the execution of e-invoicing. In other countries, e-invoicing has been successfully kind of implemented in countries like Brazil and Italy, where they've seen an improvement in VAT compliance and a reduction in fraud. And then the HMRC in the UK is considering whether we do it directly, so we're centralised, or decentralised, so whether it goes via an intermediary or whether it goes directly to HMRC. One of the questions that I obviously had picked on in looking at this was why the rollout is so slow. And perhaps one of you helpful accountants can tell me what you think about this in just a moment. But I think one of the things that is interesting is that it's going to add a lot of complexity to a system, and also that in reality, I don't think most businesses, especially the smaller ones, are ready for that type of system transition or for the system to be upgraded. I think one of the things that I always observe is when you're bringing on a new system and you're migrating out an old system, most of it means that you are pricing out all of those smaller businesses who can't afford to make that change just yet. So there needs to be like a transitional phase between one system to the next. And maybe we just need to enter into that now. But it looks like from the kind of news articles that are out there, while the consultation will invite the feedback, the full rollout won't be likely before 2030. perspectives or thoughts? Penny, for your thoughts?
What I find really interesting about the consultation is they've raised this point about whether or not transactions should be reported to HMRC or not, which, as you mentioned, India has happened in places like Brazil and Italy. But those systems were specifically done to minimize and try and reduce fraud and an error in the VAT reporting system over there, particularly in Brazil, where it's been extremely successful and has been running for more than a decade. But I think the irony is like we've already had MTD for VAT rollout in the UK, and we've already seen that VAT fraud and mistakes and errors have reduced as a consequence of that. So I guess the question from me is why then add this additional layer on in terms of reporting via HMRC and whether or not they've got systems in place. If it were me, I would be going as quickly as possible as we can do with e-invoicing, and I would be launching it into the system using PEPL, which is basically the global standard. There are other standards, but the vast majority of countries are using PEPL, which is a European standard. It's been around for 20 plus years. It's proven to be robust and it works. And if you're already complying with MTD for VAT, unless you're using bridging software, you can already roll out e-invoicing straight away, because most softwares like Xero, Sage, etc., will plug into PEPL without any disruption. And really, all you've got to do is sign up a little bit like we've had to do for the agent accounts for HMRC, is just connect that to your system. And when you click that button to send an invoice, instead of it going via email or whatever you used to do previously, it would just go out through the PEPL system. Now, if the revenue want to be involved in reporting transactions and get more heavily involved in that, I think that should be a secondary phase that comes in 2030 to avoid us delaying things, because that's the problem. Is like, if we're going to be waiting for another 5 years, we're going to be miles behind the curve and it's a waste of time. We could implement this tomorrow. Genuinely could implement this tomorrow and would be up and running with no major problems. The only question which you raised is like, what should be the cutoff point? Well, the natural cutoff point is VAT. If you've registered for VAT, you should be complying with this. If you're not, then maybe you can wait. And obviously, we can coincide this with the various MTD transitions that we've got, because we've got MTD for income tax coming out again over the next couple of years. Those thresholds will be dropping, and we can just wrap that up in the wider context of what happens as a business when you're reporting for those kind of transactions.
And that is exactly what you need to submit as part of this consultation. So if you haven't already done that, John, or anyone that's listening to John, feel free to take credit, submit it as part of this consultation, because I think it is, as you said, about the interoperability of systems.
I completely agree. I mean, the other thing is as well, is like, I think that the argument, I'll just reiterate that, I think the argument around VAT reporting and avoidance is fairly weak, and also we also know that the evidence is that the area of taxation from a business point of view where we have the most underreporting, the most errors, fraud, and underpayment is corporation tax. And MTD for corporation tax isn't going to be rolling out for another few years. We don't really know what the timetable is because HMRC haven't committed to one and the government haven't committed to one, and that actually is a fundamental one that we need to address. So we need to kind of get there, but e-invoicing should happen. It should happen as quickly as it possibly can be done, and it should be mandated. And I think we could do it as quickly as we literally could do it tomorrow. Okay, I've got a few updates from Sage. They've been rolling out a whole bunch of things into their Sage for Accountants platform. The key one, which is interesting to see, is they've now got some practice management functionality in the system, and oh dear, excuse me. And the key thing here is that you've now got the ability to launch into the practice management platform without really switching between platforms. This is a frustration that many people have when you've got lots of different systems in place, is having to hop between Chrome windows or hop between your systems on your laptop or whatever you've got your setup. So you can now essentially do things like sending emails from your client management system directly from the platform, not having to hop between stuff. You've also got the ability to see all of your client communications in one place without having to, again, sort of hop between systems. Again, that's actually a functionality that we've been talking about internally, about having this really great view of seeing what's happening, and not just in terms of comms, but also what other actions and activities are happening with the client, because I think you can quite often get communications in a document management system, but then everything else from tasks and workflows are happening somewhere else. They've also introduced a new file storage solution to make it a little bit easier to manage documents all in one place. Haven't seen that, so I don't quite know how that looks, but it'd be interesting to see what they've implemented there. And also improve the way that you onboard clients with some company's house connections and things. So again, that's kind of bringing them up to speed with a lot of other products in the market, Carbon, and a few others have already had that and had that for a while. It just makes life a lot easier. The other updates that they've got is more for international users. So they've added the ability to customize the date formats in Go Proposal. Not that relevant for UK users because we've already had that. And it's only the Americans that really affects, and they just don't do dates properly anyway. So who cares? And then we've got some additional tweaks to things like Stripe checkout, so that you can now pay by Google Pay and Apple Pay, just to make that process a bit more seamless. And the final bit is you can do personal tax in final accounts. You've got the ability to link the accounts production software straight into their personal tax software and have those have the amounts from income down to costs all pulling in all in the same place, rather than having to re-import. So you've got a nice link if you have to go back and tweak the accounts for whatever reason. The tax return and the tax computations will be updated, which is pretty neat. Very nice.
Sounds like some hefty releases there, John. I mean, do you think that then the Sage Accounts platform is coming up to rival the likes of FYI and Carbon?
Do you know what? I haven't seen it, and so I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I think they still do have sort of fairly common limitations insofar as the kind of accounts that you can produce is relatively limited. It's down to sort of 105, 102, 1A. I don't think they've got charities in there yet, which is fairly common for a lot of what I would kind of call the competitive products that are sort of in the cloud. We have this issue with Silverfin and TaxCalc in a similar place, and a few others. Quite often as well, what we see with the things like personal tax and corporate tax products is they are capable of doing the basics, but when you get into sort of the more complex side of things, that's where they tend to drop away. So I think probably what we'll see is that this is a good competitor for things like Xero Tax, and probably some of the stuff that we're seeing from Bright Group and others, a Capium. But I think if you're kind of trying to compare it to say like a CCH or a Digi-Tools or Caseware, etc., probably a little bit a little way off. But I'm sure they've got a fairly aggressive roadmap like lots of others do, and we'll probably see some interesting things happening over the next probably 12 months or so in terms of product development and enhancements.
Yeah, as Xero Practice Manager struggled to, I guess, make an impact on UK shores. Maybe the Sage version will instead. But news, I guess, that's not so good for Sage. We talked recently on the podcast about the Sage Copilot data breach, where some customer data was shared with an incorrect customer. Was quite big news in the UK, but it's so big it's actually reached the US shores, and so they've been reporting it and discussing it over there about the risks associated with the AI tools and the rush to implement them from a lot of software vendors, which seems to push, I guess, more functionality rather than security. And they've actually been quite brutal in saying that security may be an afterthought for a lot of these software vendors, which would be not what Sage wants to hear right now.
Yeah, that is quite ballsy, isn't it? And I mean, I watched the rugby yesterday, Six Nations, and I was still surprised to see that Sage Copilot is being advertised, even though I was under the impression it had been pulled temporarily. So interesting times.
Yeah, I guess once you've invested, it's there now. You can't pull it back.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I do wonder if the that sort of security first approach is a little bit unfair, because I think a lot of the vendors that we work with, particularly the mainstream ones, do take security very, very seriously. I mean, I do have some frustrations about how we enhance security in terms of our engagement as a practice with some of these vendors through things like single sign-on, etc. But a lot of them are using things like ISO 27001. They've got SOC and all sorts of other things in place. And so I think the reality is like, this is just a risk of implementing a new technology, which sometimes can be complex to implement and manage. And it's not like we haven't seen other problems in other softwares as they've been rolling out updates. Xero, for example, we've seen huge challenges as they've been transitioning with their platform, and okay, maybe not the same challenges, but problems nevertheless in terms of usability and functionality. I have some updates from Xero. I'm not quite sure how I've managed to take on this role, because I'm pretty sure it used to be Ryan's, but I've got the usual updates in terms of what's been launched into the platform. So let's whiz through these as quickly as I possibly can. So first off, we've obviously got sales invoicing rolling out, and the old sales invoicing is being deprecated and being removed, I think, in about a week's time. It's not far off anyway. And they've added a whole bunch of enhancements to new invoicing so that you can make life a little bit easier and effectively bring it back up to parity with the old system. So you can now use keyboard shortcuts to speed up the way that you enter data into the invoices, which is great to hear. You can also attach files just by dragging and dropping onto the page, which you could do with old invoicing. You've also got some enhancements to the ability to view stock on hand when you raise an invoice, which I think is a really cool thing. So you can actually make sure that you do have stock on hand before you raise an invoice. You can also just tweak some of the exchange rates, because normally you just have that xe.com fee coming straight in, but you can override that, or you can set a specific rate if you've got contracted a rate that you'd apply. And you can also now add tracking categories to invoices to make it a little bit easier to manage. I kind of thought that was already there, but maybe I've missed a trick there. But that's some automated stuff that they've enhanced. They've also made some changes to bill entry, just to make the processing of multiple bills at once a little bit easier. And that's simply by being able to drag and drop documents onto the platform. So if you kind of used to email to bills and other things like that, you can add additional functionality by being able to drag, like I say, more invoices onto the same bill and just enhance the data. There's some changes to Malaysia, which I'm not going to get into. And then from the UK point of view, they've also then streamlined tax workflows and compliance. So you can now electronically submit amended accounts in Xero Tax. They've added the ability to put additional notes on FRS 105 and 121A accounts to explain those changes. And you can now set up and manage your government gateway IDs for Xero Tax in one location. Previously, you were having to kind of hop into the personal tax elements, and then you're having to hop into the VAT side of it to pull all that together. It's now all there in sort of Xero HQ, which is quite nice. And for some practices, you might have multiple government gateway IDs as well, which makes life a little bit challenging. So, that's certainly one of the issues that we have, because we've got a few for the same place. And then finally, there's some other additional changes for international users across US and NZ. Reporting for not-for-profits, which may be of interest, and some additional enhancements to sales ordering, and some specific US tax changes for anyone that's got to do 1099 filings, which is not something that we can pick up, but it's an integration that they've got with Avalara to enhance the ability to file some of your sales transactional reporting requirements.
Woo! Take a breath, John. Did you think about any of these changes and then you thought, well, this one's a really good one because of X or Y or Z is my favorite? Or do you just then make sure that every single use case is covered for everyone?
I just like to rattle through them as quickly as possible, because I love the sound of my own voice, as you know, Indy.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm going to stick to Xero as well. So the Xero announced their most popular apps that were popular among small businesses in 2024. A lot of usual suspects that you'd expect to see, things like on the payment side, Stripe and Go Cardless, as well as Square when it comes to also point of sale payments. And then you've got things like on the jobbing side, let's say you've got your ServiceMate, you've got for the accountant tools on e-commerce, A2X, Link My Books, and Amaka. Is it Amaka? Is that how it's pronounced? Amaka. Amaka. Gosh. And then you've got reporting tools like Join, Fathom, and Sift, which usual suspects, Dext on bills and expenses, as well as Pleo. And then on the CRM side, you've got HubSpot, mainly HubSpot, actually. There's nothing that really rivals that. And you've got a couple of others that I probably haven't shouted out. Shopify, fairly popular. I don't think they need a shout out. Approval Max, and who else is in this lineup? G-Acon, who we've spoken about quite a few times before. And that's it. I think there's quite a few usual suspects in the lineup, and sounds like most of the use cases are for e-commerce, to be really honest with you, which tells you a lot about Xero's users.
Yeah. The one I'm slightly concerned about is the Shopify one, because the integration is not great. You've got lots of other options in there, but as their rating on the Xero App Store of only 3 stars testifies, most people would implement it and then struggle with it because of the way loads come through. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest surprise, especially as that was listed as number 1 from the way they've put it on their website.
It's kind of in the top spot, isn't it? But yeah, you are absolutely spot on. Most of the other ones are like, at least, well, actually, apart from Stripe has 3 stars as well. Both bad experiences there.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I guess staying on the Xero train, I have some positive news from the API side. Xero updated their API to now return 1,000 records per page. Now, this may sound a bit nerdy, but this has a big impact on those that are working with Xero, because previously it only allowed 100 records per page. So if you're trying to bring down a lot of data, those systems such as Geocon that do this, where they're sucking out lots of data for you to be able to manipulate it, it's a big shift change from the amount of API calls that need to be made. So if you want to get, I guess, 10,000 records, instead of doing 100 calls, 100 interactions with the API, you now only need to do 10. And that should have a significant reduction in the burden for the Xero server and should simplify the code, I guess, that those that are building into the API need to do, and should, I guess, allow a bit more flexibility in maybe some of the builds, the requirements, and we might see some greater functionality from this release over time.
A lot of love for Xero, which we're going to spend a bit of time with them in less than a couple of weeks' time. Right, Ryan?
Yes, yeah, we're going to be going and seeing, well, I guess the government with Xero. We're meeting at the House of Commons to talk all things small business and the community that supports them. So giving our voice as accountants, as tech experts that can help hopefully shape the interaction between the government and small businesses, providing enhanced support and maybe giving our opinions on e-invoicing, considering that is the hot topic at the moment.
Well, at least we know what to say now. Thanks, John.
Yeah, I'm glad I managed to give you something. I haven't been invited to the House of Commons. Clearly, they think I'm too much of a loose cannon to go and attend.
We all think that. We've got Laura Jolly on the show from XLedger. If you've ever come across XLedger, you've probably come across Laura, and she's agreed to come on and talk about bank automation and what XLedger does with this. Now, there's some things that I think you need to be doing if you've got accounting, finance, tech now, which is into automating something in the bank. But I believe that XLedger goes a bit above and beyond. So, Laura, look, what is it that you cover through some automation with XLedger, bank specific?
Bank specific. So just as you said, mid-market now, there is an expectation that usually is statements with most major banks. We tick that box like most of the players in the mid-market. But again, as you allude to, we do go above and beyond that. So from our bank automation rules to kind of automate those statements, but even further that we actually have a BACS integration built into the system, meaning that those BACS payments can be done through an automated process directly from the system without the need of downloading files from the system and then uploading them into the bank. Potentially that one getting muddled up, the wrong one going in, is there changes? We do all of that within the system. So yeah, we go above and beyond that standard statement integration.
Yeah, and I know that people understand bank fees. Payments are a big thing now. So that's something we're seeing in, I guess, the app ecosystems. We're seeing it integrating into products. But there's a frustration in that every product seems to work slightly differently. You've got ones that use open banking, or there's ones that use virtual accounts. You have to jump in and out of products. You can do some approvals in one, but the bank information sits in another, and it starts getting really confusing of what's the right product for them. Keeping it all in one place makes sense, but talk us a bit through how the bank payment side is unique, I guess, for XLedger.
So with it, XLedger is unique because it's all within XLedger. There's not going to another system. There's not going into the bank. It is all done within that one system. So from, once your invoice is kind of ready for payment, all of that approval, multi-level approval is done within XLedger. So again, there's no need to try and direct people to different areas. All of the validation is done within XLedger. So it's checking that the details match in the system. Has it got all of the right details? For example, do you have a bank account stored for that supplier? And then all of the transmission across to the bank is all done through an automated process within XLedger. With it, the user just needs to approve. Once it's fully approved and verified, you sit back and XLedger takes over. We found it especially beneficial for smaller organizations as well, because if people are on leave, they've not necessarily got a big team to fall back on for those approvals.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you start to wonder why you have to go through this complexity for the other types of systems. Although it comes down to limitations in the core finance system generally. So talk about the actual payment triggers, like a bit technical here, but we're used to, as I said earlier, you've got virtual accounts, you've got open banking, but you use the BACS payment rails, don't you?
Yeah, currently we have backs available. So we use an integration that's native within XLedger. So currently it is just backs, but we are developing that further. So there's going to be, hopefully sooner rather than later, but kind of watch this space, same day and foreign currency payments coming within the platform as well later this year. So we are developing that. We just find because we're focus more on the mid-market, backs kind of suits their needs, means they can meet all their cash flow requirements, they can plan ahead, but we are developing that further as well.
Yeah, that's becoming a must. I assume, does this come about from requests from your clients, or are you trying to, similar to, I guess, your ESG reporting, which is a bit of a differentiator, are you trying to get ahead with this?
Yeah, we have started seeing it, especially with a lot of the apps that kind of are in the kind of smaller ecosystem, but we haven't really seen it in the mid-market. So we're trying to get ahead. We have similar functionality within the Nordics. So we're trying to replicate that as well to ensure that we kind of are meeting all of our clients' needs and just ticking those boxes, especially with foreign currency. We're getting a lot of bigger clients that need to make a lot more foreign currency payments, that there is limited options out there. So let's try and kind of resolve that issue within the system without having to add on more and more apps.
Yeah, that'll make sense. And I know that your big focus is on multi-entity. So how easy is it to utilize your payment system across multiple different entities, groups, etc.?
Yeah, with any group structure, it can be done at that kind of top level. So you can do kind of one payment run. You can still filter and sort on all of the different entities. So if you need to see how much is coming out of entity one, you can still see all of that, but you're just sitting that top level. With that as well, we've had clients that have, thousands of payments a week. They've gone from, 7 hours of processing in an older system down to less than half an hour within XLedger, just over a 90% time saving, which has just massively helped them internally.
Yeah, and if you're doing outsourcing, as we've talked about before, on these episodes, you don't have to handle client money. You don't have to have access to their bank. You've got it all segregated in the finance system that you control. They have to approve. So yeah, your governance regarding this must be pretty high end. So yeah, it seems very positive.
Yeah, we get great feedback from our accounting partners, especially that they can kind of remove that requirement from their hands and it's the client's responsibility. The accountant has done all the checking, has done all the validation, but it just means that it's the client's decision at the end of the day what is going to be paid, and it kind of, as you say, removes that burden from the accountant and puts it back on the client. It is a quick and easy process as well. We have our mobile app which it can be approved on as well, meaning that they can do that out and about. So business owners that aren't necessarily sat at a computer all day, while they're on the train, while they're waiting for the next meeting, they can go in and approve those on the go, which again is a big win.
Cool. Thanks, Laura, for coming on and talking us through that. It sounds like it's a big positive, and it's got future development to come. So yeah, if you're, we've said it before, if you're doing outsourcing and you're looking in the mid-tier space, there seems to be one system at least you need to be checking out.
Thank you.
I think with the technology side, maybe it's a bit of a blind spot, because it's kind of assuming that the state of AI as it is today is like kind of a linear curve and it's going to keep trending in this direction. And what's going to happen with AI? Well, I'll just give it to this person in the team and this person in the team. Where actually I think we're at the beginning of a kind of like an exponential curve, and it just kind of looks linear for now because of the progress we've made so far. And so I kind of like strap in and buckle up for that and kind of brush up on your technical knowledge and maybe look for that when you're hiring people, because the younger generation has been exporting PDFs and converting stuff since they've been 5. So they're not going to care too much for your 15-step process for getting a PDF into Xero, right? Sorry, honestly, right?
Yes, sir.
So there's that, yeah.
So can I just quickly, before I hand the mic on to Zoe, can I just quickly sort of, I'd like to sort of try and distill your first thoughts in terms of what specific skills should we be looking for? Is it coaching? Is it empathy, storytelling? I mean, there's a lot here that we're trying to do, but what's the key thing for you?
Yeah, so I think so from what I'm seeing from my friends and I don't know, young people in general, what I'm exposed to. Fuck, that sounds so old when I say
that's
that.
Awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lack of meaning. You don't want to just do work because it's work. It needs to mean something. So most annoying thing that you can do for someone is stick them in a job where you don't explain what's the meaning of what they're doing, and you just give them orders and you ask them to execute. It's going to turn either into military or something, some kind of like tyrannist regime or something where you're just like, Shh.
That's cool. I really like that. Thank you. Oh, and you got a round of applause.
We got out before the whole profession changes.
Absolutely. Go on, Zoe. You've always got something amazing to say as well. I think, having not met you properly before now, and the conversations we've had, I think you always blow my mind every time you say something.
We have to create an environment where it's safe to be an entrepreneur, because we're so focused on numbers and rational measurement of output. At the moment, when we're all systemized, we don't have the opportunity to try things out and take risks, because they might go wrong. And if they go wrong, the numbers look wrong and everyone gets stressed out. So there's actually something where we need to change the mindset of, we want to hire people into our businesses, or we want to train people to have more of an attitude that it's okay to take risk. And then we, as the older generation, sorry everyone, we need to be okay with people taking risks, because actually that's going to create innovation, and that's how the industry is going to change.
Well, and surely, really, actually, it's our responsibility as people that are going to be managing these people to facilitate the opportunity to take risk and manage the consequences when it goes wrong.
In my experience, when we're talking about this conversation, what I think about is the relationships that I have with the people that I work with, and that I've definitely tried to build a business where I've got to know them, I've got to know their families, they feel that I'm invested in them. I want to know about their aspirations, and I invite them to share that with me so that I can help them, achieve them. Yeah. I recognize that that's difficult in a smaller business. In large-scale businesses, you can't have those relationships with everyone, but I feel like that's really worked for me. I'm invested in them, they're invested in me, so yeah, it would be relationships for me, which would be the most important thing.
So can I quickly follow up on that, because you sort of make that statement about maybe larger businesses can't do the same thing that smaller businesses can. Mm-hmm. Is that a failing of middle management and not training them to take the same kind of responsibility?
Potentially, yeah. I think you get the best out of people when people feel like you care about them, and you're not just a cog in the wheel. And as you said, it's very process driven, so it's very difficult to kind of make that kind of work interesting. My takeaway from this conversation will be that I'll go back and I'll talk about entrepreneurship. I haven't really heard that term, and I think I want to inspire my team to think about that and think about how they, I'm trying to create a team that is, we're all working together. And that's like a cultural thing in Canada. I'm very aware that in the Philippines, where most of our team is, it's very hierarchy. Thank you. I've had some drinks this afternoon, and I'm under pressure.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Why did you do this? Thank God I was paying attention. Maybe, yeah. I mean, I'll let you know when I have a bigger team and have to hold people accountable to that.
I want to focus in the next 20 minutes on let's really focus down on skills. What skills are really, really important for us?
And just to add to it, and I'm going to say right now, one, I've stolen what I'm going to say this week, and I'm going to take it home with me. And it's all about mindset. It's all about skill set. And the thing that we do is we go and look for the most productive type person in our business. And in fact, it's the worst thing that we should be doing. We should be getting the laziest person in our business, because the laziest person will always find the shortcuts. And that's how we'll be productive.
That's the definition of efficiency, right? Is being proactively lazy. She's been waiting a long time for this.
That's right. So a skill I think that's needed, that is maybe not for the new people coming in, but for the current leaders. Something I wish I'd had, and I don't think it's a difficult one. It's transparency. So when you've got someone that wants to be an entrepreneur themselves in the future, they're going to have a different skill set than the majority of our workforce, who are always going to be employees. And something that's really wound me up is speaking to accountants that have been employed their whole life trying to tell me about business, and they've never run a business. So how do we change that? We bring the people in on the journey of our own businesses. Me and Zoe often ask our team, how do we give you autonomy so you don't have to come back and ask us this question again? How do we make you feel safe that you can go and make a decision without asking us? And I think, I have a fun fact. I worked in an accountancy firm at the age of 18 for a whole year and did not know what the point of the place was. I had no idea. No one ever once told me what the whole purpose of it was. And to be fair, I don't think they really knew, because none of them none of them were business owners. They were in suits, big audit bags, talking to business owners, but not about business. They were asking them audit questions. They weren't. So that's what I think. So I think it's a skill set that's going to be needed, maybe not necessarily from the youngsters, but bring them in on the journey. So openness, sharing. I want them to know the finances of the business, because how are they ever going to understand a business that if they're going to be employed for the rest of their life, if they're not shown the profit and loss of the firm they're in? So I think they should be given, we give our team, they have access to a coach that we work with. We give that to them because they need to be coached too. So I see it a bit like, as well, like being a parent. I've just had a message from, I've got to tell you, I've just had a message from my 14-year-old daughter who has managed to just sell her pony because she wants a bigger one. She's sold it for $8,500. Do you know what she did? We paid $8,500. I've just told her, and she said the price is negotiable if we find the right owner. She's written an advert. She's just sent me the advert. But what she's done, which I think is just, she found his passport and she went back and contacted all the previous owners who have possibly loved him in the past. Oh. And now one of the friends of the person that bred him wants him back in the family.
Oh. Amazing.
So now, and that's through because she sees me. She goes to the horse. She mentioned me the other day, you do something called invoicing, don't you? There's someone here struggling with it, and I've told them they need to speak to you. So we need to create that environment and treat our employees and our team members like that and show them what we're doing, because we're not normal. Our team are not like us.
I think that's a really important point as well. Thank you. We are rapidly running out of time, and there's still 3 people to speak, so we will make sure that you all get to speak, and then we'll do the awards, and we'll hopefully not piss off the chefs that might overrun by a few minutes. But Emily, go for it.
Okay, so it's not a new skill, but one of the skills that I think is really important that new entrants, and particularly the younger generation, can bring is curiosity and a resistance to current processes and questioning, as you're saying, Pete, like why. There's a comment that Graham made earlier as well in terms of, just why do you want to do this? What is the outcome? And having that approach then lends itself to lots of other opportunities as well. And I think that actually we are responsible for giving, as Carrie was saying, giving those young entrants that are curious to explore these, different ways of doing things and finding out how we are doing things, these opportunities to see that in action. And something that More Global doesn't do that well at the minute, and we're looking to improve, is bring our emerging leaders to all our conferences. At the minute, it's just partners. John, you and I were talking about this today. Like, it's only the partners that get the budget to come. They're the ones that get exposed to the other firms in the network. They're the ones that see what's going on. They're the ones that get, inspired by the activities that are occurring and presented the opportunities to make relationships with these other firms, which then obviously goes on to building growth and lots of other benefits. So I think providing those opportunities and taking the risk and sending them to this, and like our emerging leaders, we do have some attend based on some of the things that they've done, and all of them have said to all of the firms, please, please, please give your young members like the chance to come to these conferences, be exposed to what is going on outside of their little bubble in the office. And then in kind of along the same lines as that, one of the other initiatives that has gone down incredibly well across our network is what we call a social ambition initiative. So this is where we have our firms looking at something that's completely outside of the day-to-day work. So last year we had an initiative that was called More to the Moon, and it was where all our firms ran, walked, cycled, swam the 400,000 miles, whatever it is, to the moon. And all of the firms got involved, and for every firm we have a young leader that's a social ambassador. So we give them, they are the face of that firm for that initiative, and it's something that brings them meaning. It's something that's outside of the working, my day-to-day job, but I've been given the responsibility for this, and I'm going to own it, and I'm going to do something that I can then show to the rest of the firms in the network that we have, brought this, we've achieved this goal. So that's a really, really lovely opportunity for them, and it's been embraced so well. We have had, really, really good uptake on that. So I would ask you all, what are you doing outside of the day-to-day work to encourage your employees to, be able to take those risks, have those opportunities, and feel that there's meaning not just in the day-to-day items that they're doing, but the good that your organisations are generally bringing. I mean, Gavin's a great example of this. James, you too. But yeah, I really think that's an important point. What are you considering outside of the actual paid work?
Awesome, thank you, Emily. I think just to pick up on a couple of points there, and I'm going to pass the mic to Damo, and then we're finishing with Justine. That agility point that you make about small firms, we see that all the time. We've seen that with tech adoption in particular over the last sort of 10, 15 years in the cloud space, and probably a little bit in the AI space. So I think there's a little bit of a balance redressing there with medium to the larger firms sort of being able to pick up the slack a little bit there. But and it's even worse in a network, like more, because you've got to deal with not just that one organisation but multiple organisations. The irony is like larger firms are a microcosm of small firms. We're departmentalised. We have a payroll team, a bookkeeping team, an accounts team, an audit team, etc. You can chop and change that. You can slice it into much smaller pieces. So you can still have the agility there if you've got the right people in the right places, if you've got the right management, the right incentives, the right objectives, and get people aligned with a vision and a strategy and a set of goals. And I think that ultimately is one of the challenges that we have. But Damo, go.
Everything you just said. I mean, that's pretty. I think I'm not an accountant. I've worked in some big companies that have been new entrants in a market that's been established, and like thinking about what was different. I think a lot of it's really been covered. But like when I've hired people and Xero is probably the obvious example that everyone will resonate and know. You obviously hire people on their skills that they bring and the roles that you're hiring for, but fundamentally everyone who we always hire, and I've hired probably 500 people in my career, it's always been about, have they got a growth mindset? Are they curious? Are they fearless? Are they willing to push themselves outside of the boundaries and look back and go like that, I've pushed myself, and it's about the journey of like developing themselves. And you don't hire anyone. I wouldn't hire anyone who doesn't do that, because they end up in the 80% of people that they end up in the people that the 80% of people that do 20% of the work. If you end up hiring those people, and so actually looking at people that really have that growth mindset is like it's a necessity. It's like a mandatory hiring requirement, and has been, and I think has made the difference in every experience I've been in around that. And then so what that meant from a company, how do you attract that? Well, especially the youth, the youth today. The people that really turn out to be amazing are the ones that actually have those characteristics and are driven by, as you said, purpose. I didn't set out to be like a software leader in payments and accounting software. And I imagine a lot of people didn't go to school and say, I want to be an accountant. But they do want to make a difference in the world. And I think making a difference in the world has been, when I was at Xero, that's like genuinely every single person in that organisation felt like they were making a difference beyond just selling accounting software. And that was through leadership. That was through setting vision, setting a clear kind of purpose, and having a mission that people could rally around. And so I think that's a skill set. And I think you see that in this room. I mean, I look at the accounting practices in this room, and the type of the way you think about building your business. That's so different than the industry. And I think if more people around the industry followed that suite, and someone came along who really, really had a big vision and a big purpose, I think it would attract a lot of that new talent and attract a lot of change to the industry. So that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Timo. That's awesome. And I think you've worked in an organisation that's become probably bigger than any of the other organisations in here that we've had experience of, with probably the exception of a few people who've worked for the Big Four. And I think it's always fascinating to see how even the Big Four firms can maintain a level of agility and purpose and things like that, even if we might take the piss a little bit out of them sometimes. Justine, you are last but definitely not least, and we do have a little bit of time because I've told the chefs we're going to run over, so don't worry about having to rush. I just want to ask you, I'm sure you've got some thoughts anyway, but I just want to ask you, you've got a very interesting family background with Lisa and your wider family as well, and I think that's lent itself to your personality traits and also the skills that you've brought into your business that you established and stuff. So I wonder, how can we try and replicate some of that? Clearly we can't all grow up, in the same environment, because that's not impossible. But how can we replicate some of those things to make it easier for people to understand more about business or more about relationships with people and things like that?
I really don't know, because what happens to me is I get so impressed by people that didn't grow up in that environment and yet managed to steer their own ship. Like we were brought up making our own decisions from no age at all. We were managing people older than us. We were encouraged in a way that I don't see very often. So when people do it and they're like, oh yeah, my mum was a teacher and my dad was a GP, you know, I'm like, where did you get the confidence to do that? I don't know how you teach it. And I think the people coming into the industry are not actually going to have any extraordinary skills because they're taught in such a old-fashioned way. Like they're not going to have that. So what's going to happen is they're going to work in firms with their unique perspective that none of us had because we didn't grow up with all the social media around us and all the rest of it. And they're going to see problems with the way that we're doing things. And it will be around working hours and all that kind of thing. And they're going to think, I can do this better. And it's the ones that can see a better way that will create their own firms. And they will be the ones that disrupt the industry and come in with the skills. And it will be, to me, the thing that lacks most is communication. And I think their methods of communication will be so different from ours, it will be mind-blowing at some point. But who knows how that will look, because I can't imagine it.
Amazing. Right. Well, thank you, everyone, for contributing.
And that brings another episode of the Digi-Tools and Accrual World podcast to a close. Thank you for listening. And please do leave a review, rate us, and make sure you subscribe so you catch every episode going forward. Hope to hear from you again soon.